And welcome back to Newsmax Now. I'm Miranda Kahn. In Boston, runners prove they have what it takes to go the distance. This is the second marathon since the deadly attack at the finish line 2 years ago. The race just wrapped up shortly. Security was once again tight. More than 3,000 officers, both in uniform and undercover, are on patrol. About 30,000 runners were on the course on this very chilly, rainy day.
In Minneapolis, Minnesota today, federal investigators now have 6 men behind bars. All are charged with conspiring to support the Islamic State. The U.S. attorney handling the case says the men had plans to join ISIS and fight in Syria. All 6, again, have been conspiring for the last 10 months, according to investigators. 4 were working in Minneapolis, 2 were in San Diego, but prosecutors say all were friendly.
In Australia, 5 teenagers are under arrest for plotting an attack on police officers. 2 18-year-olds face terror charges, the other 3 related charges.
At this stage, we're comfortable that we have this threat fully contained. I think that's an important message. We have this threat fully contained.
Officers arrested all 5 in an operation over the weekend in Melbourne. They believe ISIS inspired those teenagers.
And throughout the weekend in Oklahoma City, they were honoring or marking the 20-year anniversary since one of the deadliest terror attacks on U.S. soil. At ceremonies yesterday, the 168 victims of the truck bombing were remembered. Former President Bill Clinton, who was in the White House at the time, was there to mark the occasion. He says he got ready to return to Oklahoma City by visiting with his baby granddaughter.
And I looked at her in that crib so I could remember how you felt, those of you who lost your loved ones.
Well, the names of each of the victims was read aloud there at the spot where the Alfred R. Murrah Federal Building, where that building once stood.
The search continues now for hundreds of people missing after their boat capsized. The boat flipped not far from the Libyan coast. Italian ships are in the area, and the UN is asking for more assistance.
Well, back here in the United States, the Florida mailman facing charges for flying his little chopper right up the U.S. Capitol admits that he was a little surprised that he even got that far. Doug Hughes is now back home. He says he took off from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania on his flight last week, and he thought he could not get near D.C.
I had expected to be intercepted on the way, and I didn't see any vehicles.
Well, federal officials say he made it that far because he was able to fly literally under the radar. Well, he made it all the way into the city and says the Washington Monument was his guide. Hughes says he was trying to deliver letters to lawmakers pushing campaign finance reform.
Columbine High School is closed today once again, as it is every April 20th. It is the 16th anniversary of the rampage that left 12 students and 1 teacher dead at the school in the Denver suburb of Littleton. The 2 teenage gunmen committed suicide. Students at the school are being encouraged to visit the Columbine Memorial.
Whitney Houston's daughter may have woken up after nearly 3 months in a medically induced coma. Her dad, Bobby Brown, said this at a Dallas concert over the weekend.
I can say today, my baby's awake. She's watching me.
Well, a family member also posted on Facebook that 22-year-old Bobby Christina Brown is awake, but another source is telling People magazine that nothing has changed and she's still on life support. Bobby Christina has been unconscious since being found face down in a bathtub after a suspected drug overdose in January. And we welcome you in here. And we welcome in Ed Berliner now, host of Midpoint and the upcoming new show, which we will talk about maybe as we get closer to that.
New show, old show, it's all the same. It's just a show. It's all there. There you go. Coming back with Midpoint here at 2 o'clock Eastern.
And that's why we brought you in. We want to talk about a few things today, and we call this Midday Monday quarterbacking. And speaking of quarterbacks, we'll start with Tim Tebow. I knew you would not think this is much of a story, but I wanted to talk to you about it because of your background in sports. Not a football story per se, but Tim Tebow, can he still sell jerseys? Can he still get people interested? Or is this just a former college coach, now in the NFL, obsessed with making that style of football work?
It's Chip Kelly just signing somebody because he can. He needs a body, basically, to be a 3rd and 4th string quarterback. If Tebow succeeds, he's a genius. If he doesn't, he hasn't spent anything. He spent a couple of bucks, had him in for a few months. It gets a little PR for an organization and a head coach that desperately needs it right now. But Tim Tebow is a story only because he's there. It's wonderful. It's nice. It's a warm and fuzzy. But from a football perspective, it's a 0.
Now, if he did not have his religious aspect of all this, if he was still just a Heisman Trophy winner who didn't pray after a lot of big plays, do you think he'd be getting as much attention?
Absolutely not. No, it's all about the fact that Tebow is a different guy. He's a different kind of quarterback. He's a different kind of individual. He just professes his religion. He's a nice guy, too. I mean, he's a wonderful guy. He does a lot of great charities. His family always has. He's a wonderful story, but the media latches onto it because, oh, it's Tim Tebow. We have to grab it. It's a Tebow story. Look, remember, when Tim Tebow was originally signed, ESPN ran over and over and over and over ad nauseum highlights of this guy. It was Tebow, 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 Tebow. That's all it was. And in case you missed it, Tebow. It's just there because he's a good story, and people like to make fun of the guy. Be honest, they do.
It's true. I think you're right on that, for sure.
He's a divisive guy. Either people love him or people hate him because he's not a pure.
Well, he's not divisive. He's not divisive at all. What he stands for might be divisive to some people.
Well put. Exactly. Not necessarily what he stands for, but just him as a person being involved in the organization. He shouldn't be here. He wouldn't be here if it weren't for this or X, Y, or Z. It's a great thing to talk about. We're talking about.
Name the last Heisman Trophy winner to play and win a Super Bowl.
I can't.
You can't, because there's only been 4 in the NFL that ever have. Roger Staubach did it twice, and Jim Plunkett did it twice, and that goes back a long time ago. Heisman Trophy winners don't make great NFL quarterbacks. The history shows it. RG3 in Washington has not been a very good quarterback, and he's on the verge of being released.
There's no question it's a different game. All right, let's maybe change topics a little bit and take a listen to something that CNN's LZ Granderson talking about the GOP. And, of course, this has come up in the silly season here where we talk about things like gay marriage as opposed to tax policy in the presidential debates. Here's LZ Granderson blasting the GOP. Let's take a listen.
The fact of the matter is that the Republican field still looks like an intolerant field.
Right.
And we saw that during what was going on with Indiana and this religious right bill that's really just an anti-gay bill. Young Americans are going to walk into the polls, walk to the booth, and ask themselves, am I going to vote for discrimination or am I not going to vote for discrimination?
All right, so they're looking ahead to the general election, but this is really an issue now, Ed, in the primary election for the GOP, and you see different candidates taking a different approach. Marco Rubio says, I'll go to a gay wedding. I don't believe it's necessarily a choice, whereas Scott Walker says, I wouldn't do it. Or Ted Cruz or some of the other more conservatives say, I wouldn't do it.
First of all, if you say you're against gay marriage, if you come right out and say it, then you're a hypocrite if you go to a gay wedding or a gay reception. Even if it is one of your relatives, you are still a hypocrite, because if you believe it, stick with it and don't change it. But
so you're talking specifically about what Rubio said as a Catholic going to someone who's getting married for a second.
And what Scott Walker said as well. And what Scott Walker said as well. Same thing. I mean, that's what they believe. Look, first of all, who is LZ Granderson?
Somebody who provides us a comment to get into the discussion.
Well, no, that's really it. I mean,
that's a good answer.
I believe he's a professor at Columbia University.
Here we have another pundit who comes up and who decides to go ahead, and they hammer away at the Republican Party because they don't believe in what he believes in, which is fine. That's okay. Look, the Republicans are still very much searching for an identity at this point. They spent the whole weekend hammering away at Hillary Clinton, who was the only candidate who basically took on issues and who made a difference and said something substantive. Christie was the only guy. He went after entitlements. Everybody else sat there and hammered away at Hillary Clinton.
We played that. We showed the poll earlier. He's losing support in his home state. I don't know what that means for him on the presidential stage. But you talk about these issues, and unfortunately, it doesn't seem to resonate. They are important. I do not debate that. That's what we're talking about this silly season. But these are the things that captivate not just the media's attention, but the audience watching this stuff.
I think eventually people are going to want to hear, what are you going to do for me? It's something, we've been pushing this on Midpoint now for a couple of months. Let the candidates tell us what you're going to do. It's easy to hammer away at Hillary Clinton. There's a lot of mistakes there. But tell us what your policies are. Tell us what you do with the economy. Tell us what you'll do with foreign policy. Make a difference. I think people are going to eventually start to get it. I really do.
Well, she's out there by herself, and that gives every GOP candidate an opportunity to attack her. I wonder if she's almost hoping that another Democrat will jump in this race soon and
take the heat off
her, or if that'll even happen.
She'd like anything, at least just let me go away for a minute, let me campaign, somebody else take it. You're right.
All right, I will look forward to your show coming up at 2 o'clock, so everybody stay tuned. We'll be back with more after this.